So here we are. Donald Trump has reclaimed the White House, but with more than just a victory lap. He did it on the backs of voters who are disillusioned, disengaged, and deflated. Voters who depended on misinformation, and with surprising endorsements in tow. From city cores to suburban enclaves, Democratic strongholds went quiet as Vice President Kamala Harris saw turnout dwindle by nearly 2 million votes compared to Biden's run just 4 years ago. It wasn't just that Trump turned out his base. He had an unexpected ace up his sleeve. Someone like Robert F. Kennedy Jr., once a thorn in Trump's side as an independent candidate, dropped his independent bid this past August to stand by Trump, making a thunderous reentry with a pledge to make America healthy again. Kennedy, notorious in the anti-vaccination movement, is set to play a pivotal role in reshaping health policy as Trump's new administration, as the new HHS secretary, and he's among other controversial picks for Trump's cabinet, including Matt Gaetz for Attorney General, which has turned heads even among Republicans. Pete Hegseth of Fox News, former Fox News host and veteran, for Defense Secretary, and Tulsi Gabbard as head of Director of National Intelligence, a former Democrat now turned Republican. Trump is signaling a hard pivot to loyalists like Matt Gaetz, a firebrand ready to carry out an aggressive DOJ agenda. But what happened to the Democratic coalition? Across key battleground states like Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin, the drop-off was as stark as it was widespread, as Harris struggled to generate the turnout Biden once commanded. Traditional Democratic strongholds like Detroit and Philadelphia saw declines among Black, Jewish, and progressive voters. And the choice to campaign with conservative figures like Liz Cheney in Detroit left local organizers scratching their heads, wondering if a focus on economic issues might have resonated better with disaffected voters. The implications are staggering. As Trump's team signals aggressive agendas on immigration, national security, and healthcare, his GOP allies in a newly secured Senate are ready to bulldoze opposition, and they've also clinched the House of Representatives with Mike Johnson, putting in place new restrictions to make it even more difficult to oust him as Speaker of the House. Trump has pledged sweeping changes as in his second term, and his inner circle of loyalists will shape policy across justice, defense, and health. So where do Democrats go from here? Will they rebound or retreat into soul searching? With the 2024 elections ripple effects just beginning to sink in, it's time to break down this political earthquake right here on the political mic. And I couldn't think of someone else better to do it with than Nate Honore, someone who is a digital organizer and progressive activist in his own right, someone who's volunteered with the Working Families Party, someone who's a regular on the political mic. We're going to be joined shortly by another Nathan Brown, who's a former engagement organizer for the Georgia Democratic Coordinated Campaign. He's also a student at Georgia State University, majoring in political science. We're also going to be joined by a friend of mine from law school, Amari Allen, who is an attorney based in California. And we're also going to be joined by Cicely Jarvis, an educator who is based in New York. In New York, she is a policy scholar and a recent graduate of American University. She has her master's in public policy with a focus on educational equity. They'll be joining us shortly, but I'll just kick it off with you, Nate. This past week has been surreal for so many. I want to get your thoughts on the fact that a lot of the punditry has focused on Hispanic voters, and I've said this many times. I said this on the last episode we've had. I think the bigger story is the fact that Black turnout did not equal or even surpass that of 2020. Now, this is coming from someone who has worked on the ground. I have seen the numbers in the county surrounding the Metro Atlanta area. I've seen that in Clayton County and Henry County, voter turnout in those early days of early voting increased by 54% compared to that of 2020. So there are folks scratching their heads. Well, if it's, how is it that there were so many folks coming out? And yet, when you look at the aggregate, when you look at the map now, in hindsight, there was a decrease in voter turnout, and it replicates almost that of 2016. Back in 2016, people were criticizing Hillary Clinton. She should have spent more time in Michigan. She should have spent more time in Pennsylvania. Kamala Harris and her campaign, up to the last moment, did not spare a single moment. They did not waste an opportunity. They were in the swing states from morning till dawn, doing double rallies in multiple swing states. Your thoughts?
first off, having
Hold on. You're not. I can hear you. Try without your headphones.
no.
A little bit better, but still underwater.
Okay. We will try to power through. You know, computer
You
is
sound
getting they're in age, so it gets a little temperamental with new technology. But overall, every demographic group is exactly the same in that they need to be engaged with and catered to just like everyone else. And the big $1 million challenge is how you get all of your groups across the finish line with you without alienating one or two of them. A big criticism to me, at least from me at least, of the Harris campaign, which by all accounts, Vice President Harris did her absolute best to take the campaign that she was handed and turn it into a very credible campaign on election night. But one criticism from me is that in 2020, Democrats got very excited by the Lincoln Project, which was a super PAC set up by a bunch of Bush, McCain, and Romney alumni who were disgusted by Trump and raised a bunch of money to run anti-Trump advertising. But in 2020, their advertising did not have much of an effect. But when Biden was elected president and people pointed out that the Lincoln Project didn't really do much, they were criticized for attacking key members of our coalition. But in 2020, it was clear that what really happened is that Biden brought home a lot of Democrats who chose the couch in 2016. In 2020, in 2024, excuse me, Democrats once again went back to that Lincoln Project model, focused a lot on Liz Cheney. There are maybe 5 Republicans in the country who care what Liz Cheney has to say. Just putting that out there. She's someone who got walloped the last time she ran for re-election. Running on Liz Cheney and the Never Trump Republican vote, when these aren't a big enough block in their own party to even block Trump from getting his 3rd consecutive presidential nomination, was a mistake, because you can, your voters won't take you seriously if, at one rally you're chanting, "We're not going back," and then at the other rally you're bringing out Liz Cheney to talk about how great Republicans are. It's just not a unified and coherent message, especially when in such a heavily polarized electorate. And this election was really a 50-50 coin flip. You look at the popular vote, Trump got 49% of the popular vote, Harris got 48%, and then the various other candidates got other. When you have a heavily polarized electorate like this one, persuasion is not the name of the game. Turnout is the name of the game. And Trump, for whatever reason, is very good at bringing out low propensity voters who, while Trump has become a force in American politics, have become more and more inclined to vote on the Republican line as opposed to the Democratic line. 10 years ago, 12 years ago, these same low propensity voters would have been Democratic in droves. And Democrats just have not been able to flip low propensity voters in the way that they were 10 years ago.
And I just want to welcome the other Nathan. I introduced you already. But again, we're just talking about, what went wrong in terms of, I know a lot of focus has been on Latino men and white men. And I've said this before, Latino men have never been the reason why the Democratic Party won the White House. While the Democratic Party should continue trying to win over that demographic, the truth of the matter is the Democrats have been losing that demographic for quite some election cycles now. And so I think the bigger story is, why is it that the African-American rate, now let's be fair now, African-American men came out, according to the NBC and exit polls, at 77%, and they were followed and African-American women came out in 91%. Donald Trump did not expand his electorate. Let's be clear about that. I know the argument was made that he has the most diverse coalition in Republican history. But when you look at the reality is 85% of the folks who came out and supported Donald Trump were white Americans. Okay, so how and the aggregate, I guess, if you compare with other Republicans, yeah, that's pretty diverse. But when you compare that to the other party, that's nothing. And so Donald Trump's strategy, his message, really appealed to the folks that were already coming out for him. He increased his demographic, his main demographic. I want to know, if I was the incoming or new DNC chair, I would want to know what went wrong in the precincts around Detroit, what happened in Philadelphia, what happened in Atlanta. Nathan, as someone who's working on the ground, that there was excitement about how many people were actually registering to vote. And compared to 4 years ago, there was a 54% increase. What happened? I mean, if I'm the DNC chair, I want to know what happened in those areas. I want to go to North Carolina. I want to go to the Southeast. I know a lot of time has been spent in the West. I would want to spend some time in the Southeast rural areas where a lot of Black folks are. I mentioned the county that voted for Trump. 40% of that county voted for Trump, and there's an African American county. I want to know why. Why is that? I know a lot of folks have been focusing on all these other things, but if I'm someone looking to do an autopsy, as so many people have been referring to, that's where I want to focus my attention on. And I said this before: voters will buy what you sell them. I understand the grim realities of inflation. I understand, but guess what? We had grim realities of COVID. We had more deaths in COVID-19 than in any other war America was involved in combined. And yet Trump came within a hair of winning the presidency. He won the most votes. He was the second candidate to win the most votes in American history, followed by Biden, who won that election. And I want to know, why is that? Why is it that a lot of people in this country bought into the idea, despite being lied to, despite being sold this idea that the pandemic was just going to evaporate away, that things were under control when there was no vaccination on the horizon, there was no kind of sense of comprehensive government, because every state was doing everything differently depending on who was in charge of the governor's mansion. I want to know, if the Republicans were able to sell Trump in the most catastrophic year you could be president, and he still came close, why is it that the Democratic Party could not sell the fact that, yes, we have an 81-year-old candidate? And I said this before, I'm going to still say it. Why is it that we couldn't sell the fact that, yes, he's old, but guess what? Government is working again. Yes, he's old. Crime is at a 50-year low. Yes, he's old, but guess what? Jobs are coming back. We have months of consecutive job growth. Yes, he's old, but your bridge in your community that hasn't been touched for 40, 50 years is being rebuilt. We should have been able to sell it. And this is the thing. This is the message I'm trying to get home to. Swapping candidates, and this is my opinion, and this is what I've seen. Swapping candidates does nothing if you've already cast doubt on your candidate. And let's be clear, the candidate and the message are inextricably linked. They're one and the same. You cannot throw out the candidate and expect people to still buy the message. So if there was a national and public outcry for Biden to step down, voters see that. They see that there's a lack of conviction in not just Biden, but they tie it to the entire Democratic agenda, that the administration is in over its head with inflation, that they don't know how to manage with two foreign wars, one in Israel and one between Russia and Ukraine. That's the message it's sending. And so Kamala Harris did excellent. I think she ran, and I've argued with Republicans on this platform that don't agree because of her answer of what she would do differently. I don't think, even if she answered that question differently, and I heard James Carville said that was the biggest mistake, that when Kamala Harris was on The View and when posed to the question, if there's anything you would have done differently, what was it? And she said, I don't think I would have done anything differently. Well, let's go back in time to that day. What if she said, I would have done something different? I would have doubled down on border security. I would have, you just fill in the blank. What that would have done was, break stories that she's criticizing her boss, President Biden. There would have been even more insight and scrutiny into how the Democrats have mishandled things. And how would that have helped her at all? It didn't. Look, McCain was trying to do it with Bush in 2008. It didn't work for him. McCain kept saying, I'm my own man. I'm a maverick. I'm running away from the administration. Bush could not be found campaigning with McCain. They had to send in a video at the DNC that year. It didn't work. It's never been a winning strategy. Al Gore ran from Clinton in the aftermath of the Lewinsky scandal. Many to this day say if he was campaigning with Clinton, he probably would have won Florida. Nate and I talked about this privately. And so I don't understand the notion that if she had criticized Biden on The View or any other platform, that would have resulted in some kind of political benefit to her or the administration or anything like that. I completely disagree with that. But I just want to hit home here. I mean, everyone is talking about all these different things that could have done differently. The truth of the matter is, if you criticize and cast doubt on and show public uh, discontent with your candidate, the message is lost on people, no matter who the candidate is. And so, as much as of a wonderful campaign Harris ran, and she was very disciplined, she went on every media, every media outlet that popular media outlet she could possibly get on. She had the celebrity endorsements, just like Hillary Clinton did in 2016. She did not take any state for granted. She did not waste any time or any airtime. She was strategic in how she answered things on, in one-on-one settings with journalists. She was surgical in that debate with Trump. The message was still suffering from that summer. Anyone can jump in.
Well, Mike, I don't think you can discount the fact that we're living in a global anti-incumbent surge. You look across the G7, and I've said this multiple times on your platform or multiple times to you in private conversation, but you look across the G7, every single incumbent who's been elected since around 2022 or prior has lost in a landslide. The fact that Kamala even kept it close and avoided a total down ballot wipeout is something of a miracle. Donald Trump will come in with a House majority that is significantly smaller than the one he inherited in 2017, when Republicans held a 47-seat majority in the House and only managed to pass a tax bill that barely passed the Senate and an Obamacare repeal that was DOA in the Senate once John McCain said, "I'm not voting for that thing." But you talk about running away from the candidate. You forget Gore running away from Clinton was a mistake, because in 2000, everyone liked Bill Clinton. In 2008, McCain had to run away from Bush because Bush was so far underwater that, you said it, he couldn't even appear at his own party's presidential convention. No one liked George Bush in 2008. And again, there was a very strong voters wanted to punish Republicans for 8 years of Bush, 8 years of a failed war in Iraq, of a failed war in Afghanistan, of a recession, of high unemployment, of high gas prices, and they voted down every Republican that was on their ballot. In this cycle, this time, unfortunately, Biden was the very unpopular candidate. And look where, running close to him in a cycle where everyone hates their incumbents, and Biden was already, underwater polling-wise and had been stuck at a stubbornly low approval rating for 3 years at this point, by now. Running away from him was kind of the only choice. I understand why Kamala herself couldn't. It's very difficult to run for president when you're the vice president. The past 3 incumbent vice presidents the past 4, incumbent vice presidents to seek the White House, only one of them actually won, and that's because the Democrats ran one of the worst candidates we'd ever seen in Governor Dukakis of Massachusetts. Nixon lost in 1960, despite a very popular president in Eisenhower, because he couldn't really explain what he did as vice president for 8 years. Hubert Humphrey lost. I wasn't even counting him because he was saddled by intra-party divisions. He was saddled by President Johnson's own negative approval ratings. And only when he distanced himself from Johnson on Vietnam did we see the race start to narrow there. And you can argue that if he had distanced himself sooner, he probably wins the White House, because you look at the 1968 electoral map, and the tipping point states were actually very close in their own popular vote, even if it was an electoral vote landslide. President Bush won, but Reagan was immensely popular, and Bush was able to distance himself from the Reagan administration's scandals, like the Iran-Contra affair. Gore lost because he ran away from a very popular president. At the very least, running close to Clinton could have gotten him, if not Florida, it could have gotten him Arkansas. It could have gotten him his home state of Tennessee. Either one of those on their own would have been good enough to win the White House without Florida. And regardless of Sandra Day O'Connor's shenanigans and her susceptibility to right-wing nonsense, and Vice President Harris was saddled with an impossible situation because she only had about 100 days to mount a credible campaign. She was handed a campaign that was slipping backward momentum-wise, and really, just to me, it looks like the Harris campaign kind of ran out of runway, because when you look at the shifts in every state, the swing states swung less to the right than the rest of the country. The Atlanta Metro actually swung left. A lot of margins were closer this time around than they were in 2016 when Trump first captured the White House. I honestly, I think if the Democrats had more time after Biden's decision to withdraw, then they probably would have accomplished the impossible and held on to power during this wave where every leader is trying to figure out how many seats they'll lose, to the point where even in Canada, which is having elections pretty soon next year, the Canadian Prime Minister Trudeau's party is actively trying to figure out, is there a Nancy Pelosi who can push him out a window the way Democrats did to Biden and maybe save us from a total wipeout? And they're going to be stuck in the same kind of situation of switching too late as opposed to switching earlier and giving yourself time and runway.
Before I move to you, Nathan Brown, this is where I disagree to a point. I really appreciated your walk through history. I thought it was very accurate, but if we're going to look at the candidates individually, we have to look at Trump. Trump was polling at 31%. So many people keep saying, oh, well, no candidate who was polled in the late 30s has gone on to win re-election, which is total nonsense. His Harry Truman was polling way below that and went on to win in 1948. I digress. In 2020, by the time Trump leaves office, his approval rating is at 34%. He was hovering around 41% during the course of the campaign and still had a solid shot at becoming reelected in 2020. It was a close election.
Well, close is only good in horseshoes, Mike. Trump still lost. Close is only good in horseshoes. Trump still lost in 2020. And yes, Trump was the most unpopular president in history by virtue of the fact that he never once in his 4 years in the Oval Office had a positive approval rating. But unfortunately, Biden's approval rating tanked after the Afghanistan withdrawal and never recovered. So Biden turned out to be the second most unpopular president in history, and was stuck in this during a time when everyone in the world hates their leaders.
But this is the thing also. Democrats already defied gravity in 2022 with the midterm elections when they prevented that red wave that so many pollsters said was coming that never materialized. They defied gravity. You have to go back to Jack Kennedy in '62 to see an incumbent president do that well in a midterm season. And my point again, just go back to the top of the hour, I was just saying, if the Democrats had sold, yes, the guy's old, embrace his liability, but you're getting your jobs back. Yes, he's old, but government is running again. Yes, he's old, but guess what? Insulin is lower. I mean, I know they mention it in passing lines and speeches, but when you say, okay, 15.7 million jobs down, millions more to go, make it simple, distill it down into bite-sized pieces for people, because there's a reason why Latino men and low information voters and white disillusioned American men and even some black men were saying, well, Trump is good for the economy, even though when you asked them, well, what specifically did he do for the economy? They don't know how to answer that, because he wasn't good for the economy. That's the bottom line. He wasn't good for the economy. I ran through the numbers many times before. I'll do it again. The last 3 years of Obama's presidency, job growth averaged around 224,000. Compare that to 180,000 for the first 3 years of Trump's first term. The S&P 500 fell from 68% to 42% under Trump. Donald Trump ballooned the deficit by over $2 trillion. The Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, the only thing his major legislative accomplishment, 83% of that went to the top 1%. And so when you ask these folks, how is it good for the economy? They can't tell you, but they've heard it before and they can repeat it to other folks who look like them in their circles. And that's my point. Democrats have to hammer these messages down the way Bernie Sanders was able to. Look, I've never been to a Bernie Sanders rally, but I can say the top 1% are making more than the bottom 99%. That's his line. And that's what we got to do. Nathan Brown, you're going to jump in? Oh, you're muted. Hold on. Okay, in the meantime, Omari, go ahead.
Oh, can you hear me? Oh, I came in a little late, so I could you refresh me on what the question was, or if there
Oh,
was a question?
Yeah, we're just talking about what went wrong in terms of Democrats' turnout numbers. I know a lot of folks have
Okay.
focusing on Latinos and white men, but to me, the bigger line is why the African American community, although it did dominate, let's be clear, it dominated among other demographics, it still wasn't where it was 4 years ago.
Right. Yeah. So I think I genuinely believe that the Democratic Party, needs to pay attention to the more left side of the party, and give them a little bit more of a voice, because I feel where many Americans agree is that they do not want a continuation of the same old, whether you fall. These are the people that are not on the coast, not the coastal elite, not the college educated folks. I think many of the college educated folks in the country that lean Democrat, they're very okay with the same old, that centrist type of mindset. But the majority of America, I think, and I think this is why I think Trump has still been a thing for the past 12 years, is because he taps into the fact that people are just tired of the establishment. And the sooner the Democratic Party does that, the better. I think the reason why Kamala's numbers specifically were so low is because I think she is also an emblem of the establishment. She's literally a daughter of the establishment, from the Hillary Clinton model to the Obama model. And what really hurts is that America had already said they didn't want it in Hillary. And then we tried to package it with Kamala, and it still didn't work, because unfortunately there's a misogyny issue as well that I think the Democratic Party also needs to accept. So what you put forward is kind of what would be the son of a Bernie Sanders, because he's too old now, but someone who could speak to that. I think Bernie was able to start a movement. Trump has started a movement in this country. And I think the only way you go against a movement is you have another counter movement. And Kamala doesn't represent a movement. Biden doesn't represent a movement. They represent trying to stick with the status quo. So the Democratic Party, if we find someone who can bring back that hope, but move us in the direction that says, hey, we're not going to do the same old things. We're literally not going to go back. We're not going to go back when the Trump years, but we're also not going to go back to the Democratic ways of being more establishment thinking. We're going to create a whole new chapter for the country, but in a Democratic plan. I think you would see another Democratic win, but that's my take.
In Clinton's defense, she did win the popular vote by 2.9 million. But I get the point that,
but I think
we're still applying old. We're trying to put new wine into old wineskins by trying to copy 2008's model 2000. And I said that exact point last week, right? People keep saying, well, what was wrong with Latino? Look, we're trying to replicate 2008. That's what the Democratic Party is trying to do.
Right.
You need to realize that 2008 was a once in a generation event. Okay, Obama was once in a generation figure. Let's move beyond 2008. This is what I wanted. If I was if I was in the leadership of the DNC's political activism, I would say, show me the precincts where we were in Arizona, Maricopa County. Show me the precincts in Erie County, Pennsylvania. Show me the precincts in Harrisburg. Show me the precincts in Philadelphia. Show me the precincts in Metro Atlanta, right? DeKalb County, Henry County, Clayton County. Show me the precincts in Michigan, around Detroit. Show me the precincts, and even though we won Minnesota, show me those numbers too, because this is about math. And I said this last week. Between the states of Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin, you had 250,000 fewer voters in those states combined than last 4 years ago. How do we get those people back to the polls is the question. Latino voters, look, Harris had a 90+ page PDF document where Latinos could identify with many of those policies. So this is not a policy issue. That's the thing that I don't think people are realizing. They think, oh, this autopsy has to enjoy. We have to reshape policy. This is not about policy. This is not about policy. Trump blundered his way through a campaign in which, he had no consistent message at the end of this campaign. Let's be clear. He was on the mic making a fool of himself repeatedly. He was saying whatever flew in his head, and people went to him because they hammered into folks' heads somehow that this guy is Mr. Economy. No objective data supports it, but that's what people believed. Nate, are you on now? No. Can't hear. Okay. Cicely.
Similar to Omari, I kind of want to ask the voters why. Why? We know we have a misogynistic issue here in America, but why? We noticed that in certain states, sorry, I have a puppy with me. We noticed in certain states, they didn't vote, like our swing states didn't vote for Kamala at all, but electorally, but they voted for a senator and House of Representative as a Democrat. I have questions. Why? Are you afraid of a woman to lead your country? Why? So those are the questions that I think I share now currently in the state. Similar to Omari, I think the Democrats have to change their trajectory. We did not learn from the mistakes of Hillary Clinton, unfortunately. And I think we need to have a real discussion at the table and discuss a new game plan, an entirely new game plan. Looking forward to what that will be, and hopefully really soon. Because we have a 4-year Trump presidency. So if we don't get it now, when will we get it? When will we ever get it?
As we've been, Nate, go ahead. We're gonna figure this out before the night is out. But while you're still getting your
Mike, now you're muted.
I'm sorry. Now we're gonna get this thing right. There has been bombshell revelation after bombshell revelation of Trump's cabinet picks. The most stark and the most distressing among both parties that may not get enough votes to get confirmed in the Senate is that of Matt Gaetz, Republican congressman, who has made it his sole mission to be a thorn in the side of McCarthy, Kevin McCarthy, during his speakership. He was the face of the mutiny that took place on the House GOP side to get rid of Kevin McCarthy, really for doing what he was supposed to do, for trying to strike a deal to keep the government funded. Matt Gaetz has been under a cloud of ethics investigations pertaining to sleeping with minors. I mean, there's no pretty way to say that. That's what he's been under investigation for. You have Republican congressmen saying to reporters and journalists that he's under investigation for that, and people need to look into that. I mean, his own colleagues have been throwing him under the bus on that and pointing out that he's someone that's questionable because of those reasons. Given Gaetz' reputation and polarizing nature, in your view, is this a case of Trump rewarding loyalty over credibility? And how could Gaetz' appointment affect the morale and stability of the Justice Department if he is confirmed?
Absolutely. So, especially around January 6th, that Trump was unable to do because there were a few people in the Justice Department who were like, you know, Mr. President, I really like you, but this is bonkers and I can't put my name on this. It's the same concept as pretty much almost as Nixon's Saturday Night Massacre, where he told the Attorney General to fire the special counsel, and so the Attorney General said absolutely not and resigned, and then he told the Associate Attorney General the same thing, and he said no, and Nixon fired him. And then he went to the Deputy Attorney General, and he said no. And he went through a list of his own political appointees until he found one who would fire the special counsel. It's the same principle now, right? Jeff Sessions did everything Trump asked him to, except for interfere in the Mueller investigation, and so that made him unworthy. Barr literally spent his tenure as Attorney General writing out new legal theories that made Trump basically a king, but he would not sign on to January 6th stuff, and so he was shown the door. The guy who was there in between, again, similar story, because who Trump really wanted, everyone told him, if you appoint him acting Attorney General, we will all walk out of this White House right now. And so this second time around, Trump wants people with unquestioned loyalty. And when you think about who has been unquestionably loyal to Donald Trump, Matt Gaetz is at the top of that list. Now, to be clear, I don't think Matt Gaetz is confirmable in I really don't think he's confirmable in a Senate where Republicans have to be thinking about 2006 of the 2006 midterms, where Democrats beat them across the map, but they're going to be saddled with a very unpopular president, and your fringe people like Susan Collins and who is acting years about Roy Cooper challenging in 2 years. I don't think Gaetz is confirmable, but this isn't about who is confirmable. It's about who's most loyal to Trump and who is going to do Trump's bidding. And Matt Gaetz is someone who Trump knows can be relied upon to do his own bidding.
Nathan.
Let's try it again. Can you hear me now?
Yep, can hear you.
Woo! So it's great to be here. Thank you for having me, Mike. Nathan, good to see you. Amari, Cecily, nice meeting you all. So a couple of points were addressed earlier. I came in as we were, doing, I guess, the autopsy report, and there was a lot that was mentioned, but in particular, I wanted to kind of start by looking at 2022 and the anomaly that it was in Democrats performing or overperforming expectations. At least for this cycle, maybe we do better among high propensity voters than lower propensity voters. Maybe it's that when high propensity or low propensity voters vote, maybe it's something that Democrats are now, it shouldn't have to be, but Democrats are now like, uh-oh, because like when you look at not just the midterms, but also special elections that happened, if you're familiar with the race that happened in Nebraska's 1st congressional district, we came within 5 points of winning, and that's not Don Bacon's district. That is Mike Flood's district now, a pretty staunchly Republican district. But I look forward to the part of the conversation that we're going to have tonight, in which we discuss on what issues we should move to the left or the right. And I agree to a certain point, the party should not really look too deep into what the policies should be, because we were the only campaign, only party, only political entity running on policy. The other guy was talking about eating cats and dogs and concepts of a plan. So like in my experience on the campaign, like I know that we did our job. We did our job on the ground, because I just have some numbers here. In Georgia alone, we made over 4.3 million calls. We engaged over 59,000 volunteers, many of whom were new volunteers. Many donors, first-time grassroots donors, engaged in a political process for the first time. and we've knocked over 800,000 doors, right? So we did what we needed to do, and we did mitigate the red wave that happened, in which states like New Jersey, which was Biden plus 15, ended up Harris plus 4 or 5. We avoided that in the swing states. So ground game matters, and ground game is what kept this race close. And it's also what's going to win Democrats the House quite easily in 2026, by keeping the House majority slim for Republicans. So, I think with all the pleasantries out the way, in terms of what the campaign was able to do, I think we should have a conversation about what this new era goes, or what this era should look like. Goodness.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're all in agreement that the Obama era or the Obama coalition is flailing. It doesn't look good. So we need to consider what are our priorities as a party, because I do agree we should kind of move more toward the Bernie Sanders wing of the party on economic issues. It is popular, expanded access to healthcare. It is popular to raise the minimum wage that hasn't been raised since I was in preschool federally. It is popular to have universal childcare, affordable childcare at the very least, and a child tax credit. So I think that's one thing that we should run on. And in order to win among working class folks, I also think that working class among all voters, but even the white working class, whose interests I believe we still represent as a party, maybe on the cultural issues, you tone down how you talk about some certain issues, or allow Republicans to talk about you on these certain issues.
Yeah.
So it was a lot that I mentioned, but that's what I hope to talk about in this conversation tonight.
I'm glad you brought out those numbers, because, it just paints a stark reality that despite all of that, Democrats are fighting an uphill battle with misinformation. I'm going to be clear. Misinformation won in 2024. That's the line. That's the headline. Misinformation won, not Trump. Trump won because he happens to be on the side of misinformation, but misinformation won because there's no way you could look at Kamala Harris and all the details she had, right? She had, you mentioned the child tax credit. She had a program to get the federal government to invest in businesses, right? Hispanics pride themselves in being business-minded people, just like many African Americans, right? So this should have been attractive to these demographics. You go down the list. I mean, even if you're not thinking about the state of our democracy, which should be front and foremost, the fact that you had a Republican candidate say, Viktor Orban wants me to be the commander in chief, that should have been enough. But just say, okay, you're more of a bread and butter issues kind of person. On the issues, there was no comparison. She had a healthcare plan to expand the ACA. You compare that to a concept of a plan. He's been running since 2022. Why do you still have a concept of a plan? She was running for how many months, and she had more details than he ever articulated since he announced the night of the 2022 midterms, right? So this the fight that Democrats are fighting is not even one against Republicans anymore. It's one against lies, misinformation. There was a Democratic local candidate in one of the campaign offices who said, why is it that you see some of the campaign signs that says Trump will secure the border, Kamala Harris open borders, right? The Democrats should have said Harris prosecutor, Trump felon. Harris strengthen the rule of law. Trump wants to overturn the Constitution. Harris president, Trump dictator on day one. Like, just take his own words and make these stark reality. Put it on yard signs. Put it on T-shirts. And this is the kind of messaging I'm talking about, right? We can explain away why these policies are going to be beneficial, but unless you really make it die down and real and concrete, make it resonate with people the way MAGA's lines are resonating, okay? We should have combated that Sleepy Joe stuff a long time, but instead we let it sink in. Some of us believed it, and we acted accordingly. We blinked. You don't want to let your opponent see you blink. You want to fight back, but you sent me a private message, Nate, about Nikema Williams' position as the chair of the Georgia Democratic Party being in question because Georgia didn't turn out the way it did 4 years ago, with John Ossoff allegedly saying that he does not want her at the top of the ticket. He does not want her as the chair if he's at the top of the ticket running for re-election for the Senate. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So, in the days since the end of the campaign, really as a party, I think we have had, or as a campaign apparatus, I should say, we've had time to kind of think aloud, openly and honestly and candidly with one another. And there were a lot of discrepancies that were aired out in private. And, I think as a collective party, certainly elected officials, after January 3rd, when we're finished packing all those vacant court seats, because we're not going to be governing because we don't have the majority, we'll have enough time to think about what the party should look like post January 3rd. But, as for the Democratic Party in Georgia, we definitely have the people that are ready. But I think what the biggest issue with the Democratic Party of Georgia right now is the fact that you have a leadership team that does not have experience in organizing in Georgia. And that really matters. We want to make politics local. When I was on the campaign trail, I was the engagement organizer. So my job was to communicate on digital spaces with people just like you, Mike, and to have my own seminars and Project 2025 information sessions, which I'm pretty sure I'd memorized at this point. I'm doing it for 6 months every Wednesday. But, I would try to tie it to issues at home. We know that they want to take away energy projects and for the federal government under Donald Trump to determine what communities are eligible for energy projects, right? I still made it local while talking about these issues. I worked in a city called Conyers. If you're familiar with downtown Conyers, at least Old Town, then you'll know that there's a train track, there's a railroad that runs right through the heart of downtown Conyers. What if something like what happened in East Palestine, Ohio, happened in Conyers? Do we have the wherewithal? Do we have the federal funding, the competent leadership to be able to prevent that proactively from happening? Or do we even have the funds? Will we have the funds to be able to clean up our community should something like that happen? So it's all about talking to people that having people who are experienced in organizing on the ground in Georgia, and not just bringing. And we appreciate people coming from out of state. We appreciate their experiences. We appreciate everything that they bring to the table. But let Georgia folks lead the organizing team in Georgia, right?
I want to pivot back to the Trump cabinet picks. So far, as the weekend was unfolding, you see Rubio for state. You see Elise Stefanik for UN ambassador. Those are kind of, you see Lee Zeldin for EPA, a man who voted against environmental policies, right? A man who has denied climate change, the reality of climate change. He's leading the EPA now, but I guess that's in alignment with Scott Pruitt from the first term. So you have Matt Gaetz, and he's a different character. This is somebody who does not get along with the rank and file in his party, to put it mildly. This is somebody who I could only compare him to the likes of Ted Cruz, and even Ted Cruz is mild compared to this guy. This guy is obnoxious. This guy's a jerk. Let's just put it blatant. Let's just not cover it, like sugarcoat it. This is someone who made it his sole mission to get rid of McCarthy, and he succeeded. He got rid of McCarthy. He went on his little victory lap. They didn't know who they were going to put in his place. They went through multiple rounds of voting for different candidates until they settled upon Mike Johnson of Louisiana. Was Trump's choice of Matt Gaetz a dare for the Republican rank and file in the Senate to basically kind of set the tone of what the next 4 years are going to look like? Like, I dare you to challenge this pick, right? I dare you to defy my wishes in this.
Maybe. Again, I have doubts about Matt Gaetz's confirmability in you have a Democratic caucus that has become increasingly liberal with the retirements, with the impending retirements of Manchin and Sinema, and swapping out Sinema with Ruben Gallego, who is a legitimate a statewide race in Arizona. Was
You're breaking up, Nate. You're breaking up. Anyone else can jump in the meantime.
How about now? Is that better? Okay. But I don't think Trump is thinking about strategy, right? We saw in Trump's first term that he very much was kind of, Trump's Republican Party is one that very frequently stumbles over its own feet, to put it mildly. Again, this is a party that in 2017 had a 47-seat majority in the House of Representatives and could still get barely anything done with that 47-seat majority, versus you look at Democrats with a 50-50 majority in the Senate and a 6-seat majority in the House, passing the American Rescue Plan on party lines, passing the Inflation Reduction Act on party lines, passing a whole lot of things with very narrow majorities and not even breaking a sweat. And you look at Republicans with a 47-seat majority not being able to do anything. And then you look at how at the people Trump is picking. He's picking a lot of House people, and they have a very tiny majority already. With Matt Gaetz resigning, with Elise Stefanik, with Tim Walz, and the one or two other people he's taken out of the House, plus add in the very vulnerable front lines like Don Bacon in Nebraska, who is probably toast in a Trump midterm, like Mike Lawler in New York, who is very clear that he plans on running for governor, which means he's going to have to moderate his image a whole lot. Right now, Republicans will not be in the majority on January for the first 100 days of Trump's term if he gets all of his people in. Like, these are not people. What Vice President Harris said was, these are not serious people, but the consequences of them in government are serious. But unfortunately, the American people did not want a serious president. They wanted a president who said and did all the things Trump did. So, here's where we are. This is what the people voted for. And so we've just got to buckle in and figure out how we're going to protect our communities.
Similarly to Nathan, I don't think this is serious. I don't think he will become confirmed. I think right now Trump is trying to see how far he can push the buttons and see what he can and can't do. This is just a trial and error thing. Personally, it feels like an SNL skit gone wrong when it comes to, the entire election, but especially now, it just seems like a SNL skit gone absolutely wrong. Trump is trying to pull anybody. It's like, hey, I got a whole bunch of candy. Let me give it to my friends. And he's just passing out things that people don't deserve at all. Unfortunately, again, it goes back to what Nathan just said. That's what the people voted for. That's what the people wanted. And now we have to figure out how to survive the next 4 years. And I think the only way that we can do that is by tapping into our communities and supporting each other. And I think we just have to wait to see for confirmation. But this is not a wise decision on his part.
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in and add on to that. Like, absolutely. Somebody in the comments, Ethan Tillman, he said that Trump will certainly view Gaetz' confirmation as a litmus test for loyalty to him. Let's not forget, it's not only Matt Gaetz who is the unserious appointee. It's also the nominee, I don't even know his name, for Secretary of Defense. Huh? I saw a video of that guy doing axe throwing, and he missed. And that is the guy that this whole thing is a joke. Seriously. But you raise a good point, Cicely, in saying that's what the American people voted for. And in the initial week after the election, I spent a lot of time coping in anger and confusion, but I didn't have much contempt, because contempt, the difference between anger and contempt is anger means that I want a resolution. I still love you. I still have passion for you. But contempt would be, I simply want nothing to do with you. And a lot of people, especially, it's anecdotal. It's my feed on TikTok. But, a lot of people, especially in the Black community, especially Black women, are kind of throwing their hands up and saying, you know what? I'm done with politics. I'm done. I'm not going to be advocating for anything. I'm not going to be advocating for you or your suffering. I'm not going to say anything. I'm done. Leave me out of it. And that's how I felt in that first week. But I think we are burdened with telling people, respectfully, I told you so. I told you so when that tariff hits, when there are mass deportations, when so many other things happen. We've got to be there to not just say, I told you so, but to provide a viable alternative solution.
No, that's excellent.
We're never going to see.
Yeah, that's an excellent point, because it's not just about I told you so for petty reasons, but you have to make it. This is the consequences of your vote. And people, the American public's memory is so fickle and short that they'll, and Trump and MAGA is so eager to blame any kind of catastrophe or negative thing on the Democrats for even though it will be inexplainable, they'll find a way to do it. And that's why the onus is on Democrats to stop this, taking the high road. The high road has not led to the results it should have led to, because we're dealing with a party that thrives on the ignorance of the masses. That's what we're dealing with here. So you have to make it clear. Yeah. That tax hike that you're experiencing. Mm-hmm. You know why that's happening? It's because of the part 2 of Trump's tax cuts. That's changing the tax code, right? Remember, independent economists predicted that the economy was going to plunge in the next 2 years if Trump gets his economic policies through. And we've got to remember, we've got to hit that home for people, right? Because, Trump, when he leaves the political arena, there'll be another one to take his place. The Trumpism is not going anywhere, and I don't think any of our lifetimes. So in 2028, when they put someone out there and he's running on misinformation again, we've got to keep the track record going. The meter has to keep running of us pointing out every single thing that caused some kind of inconvenience or catastrophe in somebody's life, because it's going to happen. And the low information voters need to be brought to account for what they've allowed to happen. What's interesting is, in the aftermath of the election, Google revealed that the number one question searched was, how do I change my vote? How do I change the vote? You can't change your vote. You can't. This is it. This is it. For the next 4 years, this is our reality. It's interesting. Kevin McCarthy said Matt Gaetz is not going. He's not going to be confirmed. He said it with confidence. So in what ways do you think the Gaetz McCarthy feud, which is really broader, when you look at it, it's a microcosm of the Mitt Romney, Liz Cheney. I can't even say Mitt Romney, Liz Cheney, because McCarthy was one of the leaders of the Tea Party. And that group of crazy is now looking at this new group as okay, that you're doing too much now. So in what ways does this feud between Gaetz and McCarthy reflect the broader struggle for ideological control within the GOP? And how might Trump leverage this to assert dominance over the party? This is a man who says, I'm going to be a dictator on day one. And we've asked the question on the show, Stephen Foster of whattheyshouldsay.org, said, what happens on day 2?
Well, there is no ideological struggle. Trump won it a very long time ago. And every time it kicks back up again, he continues to win it without breaking a sweat. This was, again, he ran a contested primary and cruised through it. Like everyone else dropped out by, the third or fourth contest. The Gaetz McCarthy split is less about that, less about loyalty to Trump, because remember, Trump was all in for Kevin McCarthy as Speaker of the House. It was Kevin McCarthy that flew to Mar-a-Lago and begged for Trump's forgiveness after he said that January 6th was bad. It's not about ideological distinctions. It's really purely about differences of ego, clashes of personality. It's much more personality and internal strife than the kind of factional disputes that Democrats have, where the center fights against the populist left, and the progressive left fights against the establishment moderates and mainstreams. So that's not what we're seeing. We're seeing that these guys just hate each other, and all they have in common is their love for Trump and their hatred for liberals.
Yeah, I would agree. I feel like, if anything, as far as ideological paths are concerned, I think I honestly, I know it's been mentioned already. I don't think Gates will be confirmed. If he is, honestly, at this point, you can't say, and nothing's absolute, right? So anything can happen in this political theater. But I don't see Gates being really more than a symbol of, when you're loyal to Trump, you will be given a reward. I think that's really all that he is supposed to symbolize in this position and his appointment. I don't think he's necessarily supposed to symbolize a particular policy decision on Trump's part, in my opinion. And I say that mainly because I'm curious to see the longevity of people's cabinet positions in the second term of a Trump administration. In the first term, it was very short-lived. The turnover was quite crazy. But it's possible that he'll keep people longer if he's being more strategic, and these are people that will be loyal, and he won't have to deal with all of that. And but there's also, I mean, this is the guy who literally, we know him now but as president, but before that, he was the guy who was famous for saying "you're fired." So I don't think it's unheard of that Gates might not, even if he is confirmed, he might not last too long. I think as soon as, because I don't think he's very tameable, and you can't really use too many people on your team that aren't tameable. And if he does something that is politically detrimental to Trump's goals, he'll easily be gone. I don't see it being that much of an issue. So I say all that to say is, if there was a policy decision that Gates was supposed to represent, I don't think Trump did a good job of that, because Gates seems like he's pretty interchangeable.
To piggyback on what Amari just said, I think I agree. Like, we have too many cooks in that kitchen.
Yeah.
And I think adding Gats to that will just cause a fire, political burnout. So we'll see what happens.
And let's be clear about the implications of what if he does get through. He's going to go directly after Hunter Biden, make the Biden family's life hell. He's going to do everything in his power to appease his master, Trump. And that's exactly what Trump was looking for, a lackey, someone he can put to do his bidding in the DOJ. He does not see the Justice Department as he doesn't respect the boundaries of the Attorney General and the President. We saw that in the way he treated Jeff Sessions when he recused himself from the Mueller investigation. We saw that in the way he ousted him and put in Bill Barr, who was willing to do his bidding up to a point, up to the point where there was no return, which was literally violating the Constitution itself in the aftermath of January, in the context of the January 6th crisis on the Capitol. And we saw that, if given the second term, he was going to put someone who was more subservient, more obedient to him. And that's the kind of person he's going to put in charge of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the FBI. One other pick that we haven't discussed is Tulsi Gabbard. someone who is a turncoat. He was a Democrat, became Republican, helped Trump in his debate prep. Someone who's been very vocal on Fox News, someone who, while she was running for president as a Democrat in her own right, made it her sole mission to go after Hillary Clinton, who was not on the debate stage with her. She had 16 other opponents, and Hillary Clinton was not one of them. Tulsi Gabbard has been chosen for Director of National Intelligence. And the reason why that's so significant is because Gabbard is very closely aligned with the Kremlin, with Russia's interests. And you have certain states saying, look, if she's the DNI director, we're not sharing intel with Tulsi Gabbard. Could this perception undermine her ability to lead U.S. intelligence agencies that have consistently identified Russia as a primary adversary?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I find the combination of Tulsi Gabbard and, with the likes of Marco Rubio and John Ratcliffe quite bizarre. Like this cabinet is, for lack of a better term, a clown car. Like you're trying to mix oil and water and vinegar and baking soda all in one concoction, and it's just going to blow up. It like, how does that feasibly work, pairing Tulsi Gabbard with the likes of Marco Rubio in the same cabinet? And absolutely, like those in the intelligence community, which of course, when it comes to intelligence and international relations, there is more of a bipartisan consensus because it is the well-being of the country and our interests that are at stake. So hopefully the institutions remain, will hold up to resist Tulsi Gabbard.
And her lack of intelligence, in her, her lack of intelligence background. She's not someone who's versed in intel. She doesn't have an experience in intelligence, is what I'm trying to say. That speaks volumes. I mean, to be the director of DNI at a crucial time. Let's face it. There were reports of Russia's involvement in this election that broke around September. And then you pair that with Russia's obvious interests in overcoming Ukraine. You pair that with the fact that we're dealing with a situation where Israel and Hamas are still going at it at Gaza. This is a crucial point in world history for us to have someone who, has got to learn from the basics just to lead this agency. And one of the things that make, I guess, Tulsi Gabbard attractive to those on the right is her vocal stance on quote unquote cowardly wokeness within the Democratic Party. How might Gabbard address potential ideological divides within the intelligence community, especially in an era of heightened political polarization?
Well, I'll go ahead and just say it. Like, I mean, just with the construction of this entire administration that has yet to take power, we are seeing exactly what Trump in Project 2025 and those at the Heritage Foundation desired come into fruition, right? Donald Trump wants to gut the federal government of thousands, tens of thousands of employees based on an ideological disagreement, based on the way that he feels that you feel about him. Like, we absolutely are witnessing right now Donald Trump going in and dismantling these institutions and replacing qualified people whose life's work led up to their installment as the Director of National Intelligence or the Attorney General or the Secretary of Health and Human Services, and replacing them with Billy Bob who can storm the Capitol. We are seeing exactly what he is going to do, and these figureheads, what they're going to do in their respective departments. So if it does look like litmus tests for federal employees, then I absolutely could see Tulsi Gabbard or any other one of these cabinet members installing that to make sure that everybody is loyal to the great leader.
I can't help but think about Helsinki 2018. Donald Trump standing next to Vladimir Putin in front of American and Russian press, and I believe it was Jonathan Jonathan Carl or Jonathan Cape. I'm sorry, no, it was an MSNBC news host.
Was it Capehart?
Not Capehart. It was the guy on Way Too Early. It'll come to me, but
Michael Steele?
No. But he'll come to me. But he asked him, "Who do you believe? Your own?" I mean, this question could have been easier. Your own intel community or Putin and the Kremlin? And Trump said, "I don't think Putin would lie to me. I can't see any reason why he would." This is someone, Jonathan Lemire, that's who it was. This is somebody who is now putting Tulsi Gabbard, who is accused of being a Russian asset. If I'm Vladimir Putin, I'm over the moon about this election, and the news just keeps getting better, right? I can just imagine him. Christmas came early. This is, he's just dancing with the lampshade on his head. Him and Netanyahu, both of them, right? So, I mean, this pick has long-term, devastating consequences. But before we run out of time for tonight, I do want to touch on the fact that you have a situation where federal judges have acquiesced to the demands of January 6th defendants for the first time for delays in anticipation of potential pardons from Trump. Part of why this election was so critical was because so many folks have yet to be held accountable for defaming the Capitol building on January 6th of 2021. And Christmas came early for them too. Donald Trump was elected and they've got a chance to be free, to be pardoned. And the judges have now ruled in their favor for the first time. 2 federal judges argued today to delay key deadlines in criminal trials for defendants accused of breaching the Capitol on January the 6th of 2021, agreeing that President-elect Donald Trump's imminent inauguration could make the proceedings unnecessary. Over the objection of the Justice Department, U.S. District Judges Carl Nichols and Rudolph Contreras, Trump and Obama appointees, respectively, said that they wanted to conserve court resources and avoid hauling in dozens of potential jurors for cases that might be called off in a few weeks. I want to get your thoughts on that.
Well, I mean, procedurally speaking, they're kind of right, and in a bit of a catch-22, because yes, Trump coming in and as soon as he walks into the White House on Inauguration Day, signing pardons for everyone convicted of a January 6th related offense makes all of the makes impaneling a jury a colossal waste of time and resources. It makes continuing a prosecution and hiring outside counsel a massive waste of taxpayer resources. And this is, again, a consequence of electing someone who is fundamentally unserious. We are going to see people who marched into the Capitol to prevent a peaceful transition of power walk away scot-free because, Trump was elected back into office. And unfortunately, these are very serious consequences.
Yeah, I think the big thing is that they are going to go away scot-free. I think it's just to be assumed at this point. We're getting to the holiday, and also as was just mentioned, he's going to pardon them. I'd be shocked if he doesn't, because he said that pretty much like that's how it was going to go. So I think what's really sad, what's really frightening on the whole judicial effects of his presidency, second term specifically, are the Supreme Court justices that I think he's going to get during his 4 terms. And I think that just from the pardoning, from him essentially going to be absolved of all of these charges and walk away scot-free, as well as all of his supporters. It really, to me, calls into question what is the judicial system in America? What does it mean? What is its validity? And has it essentially chosen a side now? And has it just become completely partisan? And that's unfortunate and scary, if we're being honest.
And with a split emerging among the judges over whether to accommodate the prospect of pardons, are we seeing fractures in the judicial response to January 6th? And what might this signal about the next 4 years of legal proceedings under Trump?
Well, I think one is that case about the immunity. His presidential immunity really started probably the biggest fracture in all of this. And then now with his election, it's kind of like, okay, well, we're still figuring out what all of this law means, these cases. And again, resources is also, judicial efficiency is a big part of it as well. So I think some courts are probably like, we have other fish to fry. And then there are those that I think have political aspirations and intentions for continuing some of their cases. But again, like we said, we're about to get to the holidays at this point, and any real judicial proceeding on most of this stuff is just not gonna, I don't think, happen anytime soon. At least not before he can say stop it.
Nate, Honore?
Yeah, pretty much everything Amari said. Trump has no guardrails anymore. We have a Supreme Court that has said that Trump could call in SEAL Team 6 against a political opponent and be completely cloaked by the office of the presidency, because as president, he is commander-in-chief of the armed forces. Now, I hope Trump doesn't, actually try that. And I do think there's not a small likelihood that the Supreme Court somewhat walks that back during the next 4 years. Of course, it's going to be at the absolute last second when it can't hurt Trump anymore, just like everything else they do. It's very clear we have a bunch of judges who are somewhat interested in preserving the rule of law, the concepts like the rule of law, concepts like constitutional institutions, and we have others that are prepared to do Trump's bidding in fulfillment of a right-wing project that began in 1964 after African Americans were added to the Union for the first time in history.
I think one of the things that signals is, we're going to see, this is just the beginning. We're going to see more of Trump not being held accountable, right? There's going to be, moves to try to undermine the state proceeding against him in Georgia. There was already a delay with the debacle around Fani Willis. Once this case finally gets off the ground, there's going to be immense pressure from the federal judiciary, from Trump, to try to pull the plug on this proceeding by any means necessary. I've always heard folks say in the aftermath of the Watergate scandal that Gerald Ford pardoned Nixon for the good of the country so we can move on. And I thought to myself, how many of you could commit a crime and everyone wants to move on? How many of you could break the law so blatantly? And the response is, especially from folks on the right who pride themselves in being the law and order party, the party that just elected a convicted felon. Let's just move on. Let's move on and let's unify as a country. I just find it so rich because that doesn't fly for any of us. But for the president of the United States, who happens to be a Republican, it's A-okay. The same folks who wanted to hang Bill Clinton by his toenails for lying under oath about a sexual affair with an intern are completely fine with Donald Trump, an adjudicated rapist who has sought to undermine the transfer of power by looking to present and have allies to present an alternate slate of electors to change the outcome of a duly held election. As someone who has openly said he wants to terminate parts of the Constitution, who has said he wants to be a dictator on day one. Oh, this guy can do no wrong. And when we finally have him, when the court system has finally caught up to his long rap sheet, we just want to let him off the hook and, give him immunity for, anything that could be deemed within his purview and his authority. I mean, I cannot think of something as anti-American to the Constitution, where the whole system was built on the fact that no one is above the law. But here we are. This is elections have consequences. 2024 was a huge, one of the biggest elections in American history. I said the most consequential since 1864, and went in the direction of those who want more of this. And that's what we're going to see. That's what we're going to see in the next 4 years. So I wish we could have ended on a better note, but I'm so appreciative to you, Nate, Honore, both Nates, Nate Honore, Nate Brown. This is your first time, Nate Brown. It was a pleasure. Amari, it's been a minute since I've seen Amari. Graduated together in 2021. I'm glad to see you doing big things. Cicely Jarvis, an educator in the New York area, someone who is well-versed in policy, specifically education policy. So glad to have such a dynamic panel tonight. Wonderful discussion. I hope to have you back soon. With that being said, that's going to conclude tonight's episode of the Political Mike Podcast. Thank you all for tuning in. Hi, it's Mike Taylor, the host of the Political Mike Podcast. If you like what you heard tonight, I want to invite you to subscribe to our YouTube channel. I also want to ask you to please follow along on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, TuneIn, and Amazon Music. You can also follow along and keep up with the conversation through our Telegram channel. Follow us on Twitter at @ThePolyMike, and follow us on Instagram. Thank you so much, and no matter what part of the political spectrum that you fall on, I want to encourage you to stay engaged, stay a part of the conversation, and stay informed. Thank you.